So feels a bit weird being in front of the camera. All this week I've been doing like shorts. I've just been playing with devices first, trying to do slides and stuff. So I've been doing that all week, because generally I just can't be bothered. It's fine if you don't have to wear makeup and stuff, but God, no. I've dug my own grave, but that's a digression. But at the weekend, this is the format I'm going to do going forward with the new improved, in brackets, channel. During the week, if I get any news items or bits of like comic news, gossip, or new releases, things I think are worth highlighting, then I'll do just like snippets, like 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, 5 minute segments where it'll just be like slides with a voiceover. Because I work during the week, so I'm knackered. I can't be bothered sitting in front of the camera and doing it all. But at the weekend, that's when I'll do my full form videos. I'm trying to do one minimum, or two to three maximum at the weekend. So this is whiffly waffly. I do apologise. So what I'm doing this time, it's the PROG review for 2000 AD. So as I mentioned, I'm not doing comic reviews. I'll do like ones that, if it's like a new title that I think it's worthy of people to be made aware of, then I'll do a video on that. But I just can't be bothered doing weekly reviews anymore. But I am still going to concentrate on 2000 AD ones because that got pushed to the wayside when I was doing my weekly comic hauls, and I felt that was a bit of a shame because nobody else was really doing 2000 AD content. So I thought I'm going to focus on that instead because it's something I'm passionate about. So I'm a huge 2000 AD fan. So I was going to do the PROG, but I've basically recently joined Rebellion, the publisher of 2000 AD, to get my PROGs and my magazines direct from there. One, you're supposed to company direct. Two, it's a lot cheaper than doing it through a comic shop. And three, you guarantee to get the issues in better condition and on time. The current Diamond UK distributors, they're fucking up big time for Rebellion. You get the latest issue, and then you have to wait 3 weeks, and another one comes, and it could be the wrong one and stuff like that. So I thought, no, enough's enough. But if you get so for example, for me, I take the monthly package. So normally a PROG is £3.99 each. So the monthly package, you get 4 PROGs. So say round them up, £4 each. So that's £16. And you get the magazine as well, which is £7.50, 100 pages though. So we're talking what? 16, 22, £23.50. But if you get it through on the monthly thing through Rebellion, it's £17.50 or something like that. So you're making a big saving, and you get an online voucher where you can buy a book from their web store and get 50% off. So I'm holding on to that because I'm going to get either the artist Sean Phillips or the definitive edition of Nemesis the Warlock Book 3, or I might hold on a bit longer and get the big thick action one, or I'm tempted with the Scream second hardback book. So I'll be getting one of those. I'll do a look at that. Anyway, so I'm all off on a tangent. You can tell I've not done this for a while. So they sent me these two latest ones, but I did order one that came before this, which was the start of it. But it got fucked up somewhere along the line. But this is why I like Rebellion. I messaged them, and it's just one person who handles the inquiries and all of in their emails. And he got back to me after a few days, and he apologised profusely. So I have got the latest issue coming, but because of the faffing about that they've done, they've not charged me for the latest magazine and for these 2 issues. I'll only start being charged with my next one. So that's brilliant. You can't ask for better service than that. So big shout out to them. So I will be doing a look at the PROGs when my next one when the one before this one comes, which will be hopefully Monday or Tuesday. So I'll do a review at the end of next week. But I thought I could still do a review of the magazines. I spent today, it's been a wonderful way of spending a Saturday morning and afternoon, reading these 4 magazines, because like I said, they're 100 pages each. And I do let my 2000 ADs and my Judge Dredd magazines build up, because it's a lot to get through in one sitting. I was just in the mood today, so I thought, right, I'll read them. And I'm focusing on these because this PROG 485 is a great jumping on point. So as you can see, new story starts inside, great double length cover as well. So you've got the back and front make in one image. So yeah, fantastic jumping on point. And the quality of the stories is so high from this one. So in this, you get a Judge Dredd story with gorgeous artwork by Colin McNeil. And it's written by Rob Williams, who's one of the best modern Judge Dredd writers. Then you've got The Return of Megatropolis, which is 2000 AD's kind of like absolute version of Judge Dredd. So like with Absolute and Ultimate, you know the characters, but they're in a completely different scenario. But it's much closer in sound to Absolute. But they did this before Absolute. Megatropolis came up before Absolute was launched. And this is by, I think it's Ken Nyman. Yeah, Ken Nyman and Dave Taylor. Dave Taylor's artwork is beautiful. We'll have a look at it in a minute. Sadly, this was the last story he did. I think he's a wonderful artist. He's got like a very European Mobius and Ladron kind of style to his artwork. Unfortunately, he lost his fight with cancer and he passed away earlier on last year. But what a great thing to leave us on, like an artistic high point. But very, very sad that, unfortunately, like I said, he's not with us anymore. And then we've got Armitage, PROG the Ripper. Armitage is brilliant. It's a very old, very grumpy, kind of like a cliche troped British detective. He's in his 60s, and he's set in Britsit, which is like the future version of Britain. And he's a lot more flexible than Judge Dredd is. So not everything's black and white in his eyes. Very, very good. Very shoestring, noirish, gumshoe kind of story. Then you've got Judge Anderson with some gorgeous art. We'll have a look at that as well. And then the highlight for me, and of course you've got Rock the God, which is the second book of the Rock series. Rock is amazing. I didn't get it at first, but then it clicked. It's basically what would happen if an alien came to Earth, took over the body of Roy the Rovers, of like a world famous football of a footballer, and from there it just goes off at such a tangent, and it only works because it's John Wagner writing it, and John Wagner is just like one of the greatest comic writers, pardon me, of all time, with really gorgeous artwork by Dan Cornwell. But the highlight for me is Dreadnoughts. I've sung the praise of Dreadnoughts before. Dreadnoughts is basically about the formation of the Justice Department. So it's on the cusp of what we know as the police force and how it slowly transitioned into the megacity judges. So it's that weird in-between place. It's very, very raw. It's very relevant with today, with what's going on with in America, with ICE, etc. It's very on the nose, but this was written before all this has exploded in America. This was written, a number of years before, because there was a book one, and there'd been a book one and book two already. That's very, very hard-boiled, very, very adult. It's written by Mike Carroll, I think. Let me just check on that. Yeah, Mike Carroll with art, gorgeous, beautiful art by John Higgins. I thought he was doing the colouring as well, but there's a colourist on it. But the colouring is very similar to what he did with Watchmen and with The Killing Joke, because he was the colourist on those two books. And it's just so gritty, but not in a gritty for grittiness sake way. It's just a very, very hard-boiled cop story, really. Because, like I said, it's just like a little leap into the future. So it makes it even more hard-edged and more chilling than, say, a Judge Dredd one, which can lean into parody a bit. So let's have a look at the stories. Like I said, there's 4 to go through, 4 magazines. And I'll just give you my thoughts on the stories as we go along. So the first one in this is Judge Dredd, Letter from America. And I love Colin McNeil's artwork. He was the artist on America, which has come out in a 2000 AD Essential version. I highly recommend you get that. It's one of the best Judge Dredd stories ever written. John Wagner's creative high point with gorgeous painted artwork by Colin McNeil. And what makes this story good? It's basically just a little vignette where they go to the cursed earth, and because they get this distress call, it's Judge Dredd, but he's with Judge Beanie, and Judge Beanie is the daughter of these resistance fighters, which were from the story America. Very convoluted story. You need to read it. I don't want to spoil the surprise of that story. And they end up leaving her with the Justice Department, where she gets raised to be a judge. And she was like the youngest judge to become a fully qualified judge, from being a cadet. And she's basically like Judge Dredd's favorite star pupil kind of thing. He's got a lot of respect for her, and she doesn't take any bullshit from him as well. And so it's a really, really solid one and done story, really satisfying. It's one of those where you feel like you're living the story. So I would give that story an easy 9 out of 10. And then we have this art. Just look at this artwork. This is Megatropolis Book 2. Like I said, with artwork by the sadly no longer with us, Dave Taylor. As you can see, it's in this wonderful muted, almost like a bluish European style art style. Like I said, very reminiscent of Mobius, Ladron, and other artists who maybe work for Humanoids, etc. So this moves on from the first book, which I thought I might have trouble remembering, but it came back when I started reading this. So as you're reading it, thinking, oh, I know these characters, but in completely different environments. So Megacity One's not like it is. It's more like a retro noirish 1930s. Like it's kind of like Blade Runner meets Brazil, with a bit of the Maltese Falcon thrown in. So there's no real judges. It's like this totalitarian police force, but it's very, very different. Judge Dredd in this is a vigilante robot. I think he's a robot or a cyborg. Hershey is a reporter, very much like a Lois Lane kind of character. So that's Hershey. Judge Cal is running the police state. And it's all these things where they're familiar, but they're completely different. And it's jarring in a way, but it works more so than, I say, the ultimates or the absolutes, because with Judge Dredd, you can literally do anything. There's no rules. They throw out the rule book, so it's not as jarring with this, and it's a complete like pocket universe in the 2000 AD canon. And it's so nice to be back into it. And I would give the story again 9 out of 10. This one, I mean, they've done such a solid launch with this, and then a complete change in tone. You've got Armitage, Drock the Ripper. Like I said, this is set in Britsit. It features this gruff detective called Armitage. The art in this is by one of my... I've really grown to appreciate this artist, Stas Johnson. There's just a nice fluidity to his art style. It's written by Liam Johnson, who seems to be coming into his own a bit now. He's done quite a bit of work for Dynamite as well recently. But very different art style to Megatropolis. And that's what I like about 2000 AD and Judge Dredd magazine. There's no real house style anymore. Not like like if you read a Marvel book, they all look very uniform. It's like this blandness now, unfortunately. But with 2000, that's what makes it exciting. Each artist is so different in style. So in this story, he's helping an ex-colleague of his, who he trained with. She's having these big memory blanks, and she has no memory of doing things, and some of the things that she does are quite horrific. And so it opens up this big can of worms, and there's this big conspiracy. And it's just really good. I wouldn't give it 9 out of 10. I'd say this is more of a 7.5 out of 10 on this chapter, because it gets better as the story moves on. And then we have Judge Johnson with very different art style for Judge Johnson, but it works. So this is by Alec Worley and art by Ben Wilshire. Ben Wilshire's quickly becoming a favourite of mine. And the way I would sum this story up, if you've ever watched that cheesy, I think it's an Italian horror film, did 2 films in the 80s called Demons, where it was set in a cinema and these demons came to life. They've basically stolen the story idea from that and made it a Judge Johnson story. And I love there's some new characters introduced. It's these exorcists, and I like how they're carrying on the trope because Devlin Moore, he's an exorcist as well. He's extremely camp, and these two are the same. They call everybody love and things like that. Like he says here, yeah, there's just like very extra, so that's really fun. And so all these, there's this famous film director, and his films are basically manifesting all these demons when they're being played, and he's basically being used like as a vessel for this big demon, and that's where the story starts. And as only I love how with Judge Johnson, they don't really explain the supernatural part; they just let it happen, which is different to what you get with Marvel or DC. So it's really fun, and I love the he does his own colours as well in this Ben shirt, and I love the colours on that. I would give that an 8 out of 10. And then we've got Rock the God Chapter 4. Gorgeous. Dan Cornwell's becoming one of my favourites now. Gorgeous artwork by Dan Cornwell. So as I said, it's written by John Wagner. It's set in Glasgow. I think it's set in Glasgow or a made-up Scottish town that's similar to Glasgow. And so, like I said, Rock has been taken over by this alien, and the so and he wasn't called Rock; he was called something else. Rock's the alien, but the footballer who took over the footballer's a real joke, real dickhead, and so he's about to be fired and sacked by his team. But when Rock took him over, and Rock suddenly realised he loves football, and Rock's much more polite and nice. He gets on with all the team, and his football skills improve 100%. So he becomes like this superstar. Suddenly rockets overnight to this superstar. But loads happens. There's alien invasions. There's alien hunters trying to hunt Rock down. There's the footballer whose form he took over. He gets shrunk down to miniature, as well as this crooked referee and stuff like that. It's just absolutely bizarre with fantastic artwork. The closest I could give it to a feel if you're an old 2000 AD head like I am, it's the Alan Moore classic Skiz, where it was very, yeah, big, huge sci-fi elements, but then you've got like this very gritty, working class, humorous side as well. And that's the closest I could give it to. I would give it it's a 9 out of 10. It's just wonderful. I'm surprised by how much I like it. I've said it before. I hate sport, but I like reading about it in comics. So there we go. But yeah, really, really fun. And then the star of the show, and I'm glad to leave it last because it's such a heavy hitting story. Like you'd feel winded if they put it at the front of the book. And I think this is book 3 now of Dreadnought. And this story is called Qualified Immunity. Like I said, it's got gorgeous artwork by John Higgins. So what this has done, it's shifted the attention from the focus on the previous stories were on this female officer who's become one of these prototype judges, but now it's focusing on this police officer. It's weird because we've been in this transition phase. They still have police officers who are like treated as subordinates to the judges, and so he's like tagging along with her. But look at this artwork, and it is so. Oh, John Higgins is still one of the great. He's one of my all-time favorite artists. His use of shadow and form, and I think he gave color guidelines to the colorist because it's just wonderful. This story is very, very brutal. I'll show you what I mean. You would not get this if this was Marvel. It wouldn't just be one polybag; it'd be 20 polybags to stop people seeing what's inside it. But it's brutal in a way that it's not excessive. If that makes sense, it's part of the story. It's to show the harshness of this reality that they're living in. So he ends up the police officer. He ends up liaising with this team who he thinks are internal affairs. They're trying to see if they can be like whistleblowers on the judges to show that the this new judiciary is not working. And 10 out of 10. It's not lost anything. So yeah, fantastic. So 485. Sorry, I would give 8.5 out of 10 if we're rounding it up. And then we've got Judge Dredd magazine 486. Again, I'm loving how they're doing these wraparound covers. This cover is by Keith Burns. Yeah, Keith Burns, who does the Johnny Red story with Garth Ennis. His speciality is warplanes. So in this one, you have Judge Dredd, Ryan Man 7, which is written by Garth Ennis and illustrated by Keith Burns. Megatropolis comes back, Hermitage does, Anderson and Dreadnought. So it's the same. The other four stories are the same. So I won't elaborate much on those. But we'll look at the Judge Dredd, Ryan Man 7. So as you can see, Keith Burns, he's born to just draw war, aerial dogfights. If it's a story about him, you know there's going to be some kind of flying vehicle involved. So with this story, a German pilot in the Second World War ends up going through this time loop. He ends up in Mega City 1. So he ends up in the Cursed Earth. And he's there for like a year, and things happen. And I don't want to ruin it because you really do need to. I get these digitally or from the 2000AD.com shop. You will not be disappointed. But Judge Dredd becomes aware that he's come through, and he hunts him down. And in the classic 2000 AD tale, the bad guys never get away with it, or even the innocent victims never get away with it. But it was good. I groaned a bit though, because I mean, Garth Ennis sometimes, the one thing I will say against it, whenever Garth Ennis nowadays does a 2000 AD story, he's got this habit of having to bring in something in reference to the Second World War, which is fine, he's a great war writer, but it can sometimes feel a bit shoehorned. But this one, it does tie into an earlier story, so I forgive him this time. It's like with the Rogue Trooper story, I thought it was good, but I've enjoyed the recent Rogue Trooper story much more because that felt more like Rogue Trooper proper. But yeah, I'd give the story an 8 out of 5 just for that very reason of it. He uses tropes. Now, Megatropolis really progresses on this. Again, let's just appreciate the art for this. So they've now introduced this other thing, which is their version of the Judder, who were from the Oz huge sprawling epic from back in the 80s, which is one of my all-time favourite Judge Dredd epics. They were like these godlike judges in the outback, and they had like these almost like godlike powers. And so in this version, it's like this big, almost like crime boss who's got these powers where he can influence people. And so Hershey, who's like I said, a reporter, she's trying to find out more about it. And they also introduced their version of Chopper, which is it's just fantastic. Again, there's nothing. The quality doesn't dip. The artwork is just gorgeous. And this is definitely going to stick in at a 9 for that. Armitage carries on. The plot thickens. It turns out she could be involved in some of these crimes that are going on, but she has no recollection. So Armitage is taken under his wing, much to he doesn't want to because it goes against everything he has as a copper. You know, he doesn't want to get involved, but he can feel himself getting involved with her because he has a lot of affection for her. But it turns out this one finishes on a cliffhanger, and you realise that there could be somebody else that's involved that is causing us to have these blackouts and causing us to act out of character. So for that point, it does get increased. That's going to be an 8.5. And then Anderson, this artwork's still very, very good, very colourful. It's still playing up the demons kind of 80s VHS horror trope. But I'd say it's the least essential story in the whole magazine. So for that, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because I think it dipped a bit. It feels a bit bloated. This feels like it could have finished in a 2-issue story instead of carrying on like it is doing. But again, the Exorcists are the stars of the show for me. They have the best lines. And then we move on to Rock the God. It's just wonderful. And Dan Cornwell's art he makes everyday life look gorgeous. It's just this weird blend of sci-fi and slice of life, and it shouldn't work, but it does. So again, I'm going to give it it's a 9 out of 10 again. But again, start of the show Dreadnoughts. Just look at the art, even if you didn't like the story. The art is just gorgeous, and the talk isn't. You don't feel like you just talk. You don't feel like it's just bubbles what you got to read. The dialogue is important. It's like when you watch say something like The Wire or Homicide, Life on the Streets. The dialogue is important, and this is what this feels like. But again, it keeps you entertained with the brutality as well. I mean, look. I mean, John Higgins now, I think he must be in his 70s, but he's got the art and the passion and the dynamism of an artist half his age. He's got the. This shows that it doesn't matter what age you get to. Some artists carry on getting better and carry on stretching themselves. When you compare it to something say like Frank Miller, I love Frank Miller, but I think he's had his best day. I think John Higgins is still getting better and better. And again, the story just ratchets up, and there's a huge twist. Is it in this one? No, in the next one. But for that one, again, so it's a 10 out of 10. And then we come to the Christmas issue. Obviously, the 2018 Christmas issue is a big bumper one. This it's already 100 pages. They don't do a bumper one. The only thing they do a seasonal cover, and the Judge Dredd story is always seasonal, but the rest of the stories are just carrying on as normal. Whereas the 2000 AD one, it's very much like reading the Christmas annual. But the seasonal story in Judge Dredd magazine is always a longer one. I think it's about 18 pages or something, and it's called The Survivor. It's by Ken Nyman, who's a really good Judge Dredd writer as well, with art by Anthony Williams, who used to do loads of stuff in the 90s and early 2000s. He did Fate, if you remember that one, and other stuff for DC and Marvel, and he did do stuff for 2008 for a bit, but it's only been past a year or two that he's come back to comics, and it's just a great Judge Dredd hunting down this beast, and then there's a heartwarming bit at the end, which I like about the Christmas Judge Dredd stories, where he ends up getting, even old Stonyface gets a bit of soft heart, and it doesn't end the way it normally would, where he gets his blaster out and just blows a hole in somebody or in the creature. But yeah, very satisfactory, and a 9 out of 10. And of course, we carry on with Megatropolis 2. Hi, so this might be odd, there might be like a jump in. I might have said, oh, for fuck's sake, or something just about a second ago. My phone just said I've got no space left, so I had to like cancel a load of stuff. So I do apologise if this looks really jumbled now. So let's just quickly carry on. So where was I up to? So I said how great Megatropolis was. Easily 9 out of 10. And then we move on to Armitage. So this is episode 3. Again, same art team, same writer, and the plot develops even more. And it turns out that there's this minister, kind of like cult leader, and he's influencing people to do things that they have no memory of. And so, like I said, it really progresses, and it also heats up. Yeah, so it really progresses in this issue. So yeah, I'm in. I'm synced in. So 8.5 out of 10. Really good mystery. And then the Anderson story continues. I must be honest, artwork's very pretty. It's the one thing that's keeping. I'm losing interest in this Jewish Anderson story. It feels very flabby. So yeah, this drops down to a 6 out of 10. But the artwork is very beautiful. But then we bounce back up with Rock of the Gods. A lot happens in this. So he gets hunted. He manages to escape, but he has to lay low because basically his arm gets blown off, so he has to wait for that to regenerate. So what he does, he resizes the footballer who he took the body of, and he tells him to go and play the game, and he's got to win, otherwise he'll be terminated. And he recuperates and he goes back to his home planet. And so that ties up to an epilogue, because they were initially going to finish with this volume, But that ties up nicely because then Rebellion bought the right, agreed, because this was originally a series funded by John Wagner, what he published himself as a comic. But then Rebellion said, yeah, we'll take book 3 off you. So he didn't have to worry about funding it himself. Just got to show you this beautiful Torquemada picture. So it sets the stage for the book 3, which comes out in the next magazine. So Rock the God, an easy 9 out of 10, just a pleasure. And again, we get back to more violence in a good way with dreadnoughts. And it turns out that the who we thought were internal affairs aren't actually internal affairs. They are working for somebody else, and the shit hits the fan big time. But I mean, just look. I can't show you the next page because it finishes on a real shocking cliffhanger. But 10 out of 10 again. And then we're on to the final one. This only came out this week. And it's got the return of Simon Harrison on art, who was on the 2000 AD comic back in the late 80s, early 90s. That is one of the best covers I've seen in years. I love it. Go on 2000 AD's podcast on YouTube. They do an interview with him. He's a fascinating character. So with this, we have a wonderful Judge Dredd story. Features Old Man Joe, who's from an alternate version of Judge Dredd. So with him, you do see him without his helmet on, but obviously because he's sold, you won't realise that it is Judge Dredd. So he's come to Mega City 1 in this universe, and he's just basically taken retirement there, but things escalate. Jake Lynch is doing the artwork, and I love his style. He's got a very Camp Kennedy kind of energy to his art style. It's written by Ken Nyman, who, again, like I said, is a really good Judge Dredd writer. And him and Joe, because obviously him and Judge Dredd have a connection because they're basically the same person. So Judge Dredd gives him a bit of leeway, but something happens where he basically crosses the line, and it leaves it. The setup's really good for the second part. So yeah, classic, great Judge Dredd story, 9 out of 10. And Megatropolis, book 2, wonderful again. Just let's take a moment to look at the art. It's a contender for one of the best stories I've read for 2026, and I've only it's only January. It's that good. I mean, when you get art and story working hand in hand like this, it's wonderful. And like I said, even though it's an alternate universe, it feels like its own complete thing. And again, 9 out of 10. And then Armitage ramps up. He gets intimate with this woman that he's protecting, his old ex-work colleague from years ago. And so that gets messy personnel-wise. And things aren't what they appear to be. And he's realizing maybe he's made a mistake getting involved this way. And again, just really fun and really enjoyable. And then we come to the final part, thank God, of the Judge Anderson story. It was an okay wrap-up, but it didn't feel... I think there were more... The writers more enjoying the concept than actually staying true to the vibe of Judge Anderson, so it felt a bit meh. So again, but I'll give it a slight bump up to 7 out of 10. And then we have Rock now, who comes back in. It's now called Rock the World, and Dan Conwell's art is even better than it was before. So he's come back to Earth, and he's taken over his duties as the footballer. So he's inhabiting that form again. But there's a big twist at the end of this chapter. Meanwhile, in the far away in the galaxy, his planet and other planets are preparing to invade the Earth. So that's leave it on a really good cliffhanger. I've got to show you just this as well. Rogue Pupper. And then finally, we have the final part of this Dreadnought story. The artwork. Oh my God, I love it. Be very quick because I'm scared of having to do all this again. But again, it doesn't skimp on the violence. I'm not going to show you the last few pages because you need to read this for yourself. So this jumping on point of Judge Dredd magazine. Is it worth doing? Yes, absolutely brilliant. So as a whole, I'd give the Judge Dredd magazines, with the current roster of stories, an 8 out of 10. They would get, no, a 7.5 out of 10. They would get an 8.5 out of 10 if I averaged it all off, if the Anderson story was a bit better. But even still, the Anderson story is still better than a lot of stuff I've read in other publishers. It's just not up to the quality of the stories in this. But yeah, Judge Dredd magazine is very good value. It's £7.50, which you think, oh my god, that's deep. But you get 100 pages, a little bit bigger than an American comic. So yeah, very good value. I do recommend either checking it out digitally or making an order for yourself online, or getting it from, if you're in the UK, from a newsagents or comic shop. So hope you enjoyed that. Bye. Oops.